Welcome back to Founders in the Field, the show where we go behind the scenes with agency leaders, consultants, and creative founders to show you how they're building, scaling, and staying sane in the trenches. I'm your host, Stefan Bradley, and today's guest is Andrew Ward, founder of Award Creative Content and Director of Strategy at Puff Creative. How are you doing, Andrew?
Doing well, Stefan. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for joining me. Let's dive straight in. For people who don't know your story, take us right back to the start of your journey, what made you start your own business, and give us an overview of what your role looks like today at Puff Creative.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey started in business ownership around 2017 when it was originally just Andrew Ward Creative Content. I had no idea what I was doing. I had been laid off from a startup job that I thought was going to be a longer-term career spot for a couple of years, and after about 6 months, the writing was on the wall that just wasn't working out in that direction. I wasn't happy with the company. They weren't happy with the work I was doing, and I was trying to prepare and get ready to start into a freelance world, and just it kind of happened a little sooner than I thought, and I found myself looking around in different sectors. I was working in the tech sector, a lot of SaaS work at that time, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't feel like I had a great mastery of it, and I didn't feel like I had a deep passion for it at that time. So it was kind of, I kind of knew I wasn't the most ideal person to get into the freelance space on that, and I was looking to go back into the full-time world at that time, and I saw an interview with Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and he said basically, find something you love and find someone to pay you for it. And as he was saying that, I was rolling up a joint to smoke some marijuana. So I was like, let's take a shot at this. There's legalization is happening in America. We're starting to get a little warmed up on it. My background was always in content, creative writing, a little bit of SEO. So I had a lot of that emerging space expertise in line, and I said, let's take a stab at it. And I started attending cannabis conferences in New York and in the area, and basically built up a two-prong business out of kind of unintentionally that vaguely became intentional over time. But I did a lot of copywriting, SEO work on one side, doing a lot of blogging, website content building, that sort of stuff. And then on the other side, I was on the journalism space. So I became a journalist in the cannabis space, also some non-cannabis work, but primarily in the cannabis space. Notable outlets were like High Times, Business Insider, Rolling Stone. And over the last 7-8 years, I amassed about 1,000 published articles online. I've written 2 nonfiction books in the cannabis space. A book called Cannabis Jobs came out in 2020, and then The Art of Marijuana Etiquette in 2021. And at that point, I realized that I was moving into a business that it was, and not just a freelance job. So I started treating it like an actual business, and just kind of crash coursed and caught up on the things that I didn't know, and kind of leaned in on the AI SEO, or not AI at that point, sorry, the SEO content creation at that side, and really just kind of honing in on what I already was good at and trying to build up and get into the business space, and really relying on networking and getting in there. And it was a really great endeavor, but around this time last year, maybe 6 months prior to that, I realized that I was kind of just doing too much at the time, and just kind of getting to the point where I was diluting my quality of work, and I wanted to go and back and work with a team for the first time in nearly a decade. And I had a great opportunity where the folks at Puff Creative reached out to me and asked if I was interested in a couple of different roles, and we got to talking, and ultimately landed on this director of strategy position. And I love it. It's a great company. I get to now handle strategy as well as operations for not only our clients, but also our internal side. So for someone like me, it puts a lot of hats on, a lot of different roles all throughout the week. And it's been a great job, and I really enjoyed it. I've been here for about a year now.
But you really double down on Dave Grohl saying, work, do things that you really love and get someone to pay for it. How much did it give you, how much satisfaction did it give you from going from sort of SAS, which was something you wasn't passionate about, but still doing, marketing for them, copywriting, but actually transferring them skills into the area that you're actually really passionate about?
Yeah, I loved it. I really appreciate my time in that field, because like you said, if I wasn't working at SEO firms that were more on the general side of things, I wouldn't have learned about those industry needs. First of all, I wouldn't have been able to understand what is working across different sectors, what people really need, and then what is different in the cannabis space. And seeing those worlds and bringing it all together, it couldn't have happened if I didn't start in those in the SaaS field. So yeah, it was great, and major thanks to a company called Brand Yourself. They now were acquired years ago, work under a brand now Array, but that taught me the foundation of SEO, and really just what works across all sectors, what you need to modify, what you need to adapt to. And I think that gave me that foundation that really allowed me to get where I am today.
Definitely. So, in your role today, what does your daily role look like in working, as director of strategy, as opposed to obviously running your own business where you were kind of doing everything, and now it's kind of honed in on, I suspect, a few different things, but still less probably than when you were doing everything.
Yeah, while you were saying that, I was like, I gotta pull up my Google Calendar to see what I actually was doing in the past. Yeah, it's a lot of different things, and I love that. That's what I think. I'm the kind of person that I get bored if I'm doing the same thing over and over again. No disrespect to anyone else who does. There's probably a better skill set to have in the professional field, but for me, I get a little bored and I get a little distracted. And I think this role was like a great summary of the freelance world and bringing it in here. So on a day-to-day, it's probably about 50% internal and about 50% external, working on the client-facing side. So sometimes it's working on just strategy pain points within the team and where we can alleviate things, bandwidth management for our team, setting up for future pushes when we want to expand in markets, content creation, content flurries, pushes like that, trying to get all the efforts out there. And then half the day, sometimes different days, it's spent a lot on creating audits and pitching for our clients, doing strategy audits. Up until recently, I was helping support our SEO team, doing the SEO audits as well. I'm taking client calls. I'm working right now actually on a really cool project. We can't say all the details because it hasn't been announced yet, but it's an international project with a well-known sporting event and some pretty well-known brands. So, I get to kind of just dabble in a bunch of different areas, and they kind of sometimes come and go. Sometimes project lasts for a few months. Sometimes they last for just a few days. A lot of pivoting, a lot of agility in the role. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun managing both the internal and the external side of things.
But definitely, it sounds like, you're in your passion, but also, you're stimulated. You're stimulated all day, I mean? You're not focused on one thing. So it's kind of like you're marrying up the two best of both your worlds, I would say, in doing something that you actually in an industry that you love, but also not, being able to be stimulated doing multiple different things.
100% agree with that. I think you hit the nail on the head there. One of the things also that I love that I didn't realize until recently is just I love operations. Not the most fun thing. I don't think it's a great icebreaker at parties to tell people I love like systems management, but yeah, I love like people management. I came from jobs, not every job I worked at, but I came from enough jobs in the past where I don't think companies really appreciated the value of their people. And I think there's some jobs where the people didn't appreciate the job that they're at too. And I think that creating value and showing why each are valuable and why we need to support one another has been one of the things that I really love about my job in this field, as well as when I was freelancing. Like, I would take risks and drop clients if I didn't think they were managing their people properly, because I didn't I saw it as a big red flag for how they were going to treat me and other folks. And I brought that into this job, and, John Shute and Seamus Lahman, the founders of the company, really set a great culture over the past 8 years here. Is just, the job's important. There's a lot of hard work. We have to keep things running, and that's what I'm really about. But at the same time, we have to make sure that our people are happy and making sure that they're doing well and making sure that they're thriving. And then conversely, we have to take that energy to our clients as well. If someone isn't happy along the way, that's kind of what I've now taken in my responsibility, is making sure we can try to fix that. Because the happier our clients are, the more likely we are to retain business. The happier our staff is, the more likely we are to retain great staff members. We can reduce our churn on having to hire new people. And we got a really great talented staff here. So losing one actually is a significant punch, just on a personal as well as a professional level. So yeah, I take great pride in really loving just running the operations of things on a day-to-day.
Well, definitely from both sides, internal and also for your clients, you're probably not going to get a bigger return on investment than doing that. Having clear communications all the time, almost over communicate with them to make sure that everybody knows their role, but also everybody's happy and can move forward at the right pace that you both benefit from. I feel like it's probably the biggest ROI you're going to get, because like you said, if you lose a member of staff, it's like a gut punch, and it's obviously the same when you churn a client or a client churns. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. We have a giant Slack for our team wide as well as each of our clients, and thankfully it doesn't happen too often. But when we find out a client is leaving unexpectedly, it basically just becomes a huge self-assessment of, what did we do? What could we have done to make it better? Often there is a lot of outreach from the folks at the top to see, if there's anything we can do to remedy the situation. Yeah, thankfully it doesn't happen too often. I think the key to that is being proactive and really listening to them well before you get to that moment. And yeah, I think that, the people want to see results. People want that transparency. They don't want to get spoken down to, but they want someone to hold their hand and guide them through with the expertise that you have, and showing them here's where your money is being spent, and here are the results that you're seeing it. And, there's also other things to making people happy, but at the end of the day, if they're seeing their bottom line and their money being well spent and treated with respect, you got most of your foundation set right there.
Definitely, and transparency is such a key. Do you know what I mean? When you're transparent and you're honest with each other, and especially with the client, that's the biggest red flag for them. Is if it's not like that. If they can't really see what you're doing, I feel like that's the biggest red flag, and they're not going to feel like they're heard. So by being transparent, it's a lot of green flags, and it alleviates a lot of other stresses that they might have had. If it wasn't transparent, they might be thinking, well, what about X, Y, and Z as well on top of that, because the trust isn't quite there.
Yeah, you set a real precedent. When someone finds out that you're not being transparent with them, good luck trying to rebuild that trust. You are going to have to do months, if not years, of consistent, perfect returns for them to feel that warmth back with you, most likely. It's really important to keep that trust throughout the process. And you don't have to be transparent in a sense of, here's the problem, now what are we going to do about it? The real key is presenting that transparency, saying, here, we ran into this issue, and here's how we resolved it already, or here's how we propose that we're going to resolve it, or here's the options, what do you want us to do with it? And you can't set a precedent where that is your default, but when it happens, that transparency is key. And then, having solutions built in, or proposing solutions, and being, still proactive even when you're reacting to a negative moment. I think that's really key.
So now that we've got, background into how you came into the role and into the industry and on Puff Creative, let's switch gears a little bit. And can you tell me what the biggest trends that you're seeing inside the market today?
And so there's a lot of trends that we're seeing across the market. So at Puff, we're kind of a full service agency. So we're everything from building the website from scratch to rebuilding the website to managing the SEO, the content. We also do loyalty marketing, paid ads, social media, public relations. So we're seeing a lot of different trends emerging across several different spaces in that sort of area. In search, we're seeing that at this point in the cannabis space, for those that aren't familiar, cannabis faces higher restrictions. You can't just do paid ads. You can't do social ads due to the federal regulations in the U.S. and some other countries. You post, you get taken down really quickly. So it's a lot more of a tighter space to work in. And while that's not so much of the trend, we are seeing some areas where that is lessening. So it's still treading lightly while still exploring, but still being mindful of the client's budget as well as their hard-earned social media accounts. A lot of times, social media accounts can get built up to 25,000, 200,000, millions even, and get pulled down for little to no reason. And it's basically because you're working in cannabis, but there's no clarity as to what you should and shouldn't be doing. So while we're seeing a trend in that area opening up a little bit in the paid and the social space, still a lot of caution, still a lot of trepidation being used in there. And then meanwhile, in the cannabis, across more in the larger space, the cannabis space for a long time was victim of the startup world, where there was a lot of hype and not a lot of results. And I think that there was a lot of companies and some service providers that just kind of got in business with some folks that maybe weren't the best providers for their ROI, especially when there's tighter budgets to work with. And I think nowadays you're seeing cannabis evolve into that more adult, mature space where you have to have those results. You have to be able to deliver those results and show, here's where your money is going and here's why we're putting it to use. And all the while, you have to show that you're also looking towards the future. Talking in SEO space, there's a great sector where AI has really been a huge factor in things. So you can't just talk SEO. You have to talk AEO. You have to talk GEO. You can't just talk the buzzwords, too. You have to have the action plans. It's kind of tough sometimes because the action plans aren't fully there, and you're kind of working with what people assume is the best at that moment. And sometimes it is the long-term game plan. Sometimes it's not. You have to stay agile to it. So a lot of trends in that space. And then also, on the loyalty side of things, we're seeing that, and loyalty as well as just across the board with AI, when you're seeing a lot of these AI stuff, people are like, let's churn out AI and put it in there and just make content. You can't succeed with just that mentality. And I know you've talked about that in past episodes. You have to put in the customization. You have to put in the personalization of it. And I think our efforts on loyalty, email, those sort of areas really show where that retention capture is really important by actually still automating where you can automate, but not forgetting the human element. I think that's where we can really start driving the most results. And that creates that cycle for us where ultimately we have that ROI to show our clients that, be it SEO, social, retention, web build, we have the data structure to really show that we're staying up to date on things and really producing the best results for it.
That's some landscape that you're having to sort of like navigate through, from what I said at the start, with not being able to do paid ads, a lot of marketing agencies sort of rely on that part of it to demonstrate their ROI. Obviously getting pages taken down through, especially when you don't really know what they could have done differently. Balancing a lot of, or spinning a lot of plates, like a bit like with your hands tied behind your back. But I suppose that must make you all at Puff Creative, and everybody sort of everyone that's high performing in that industry, much better marketers, because you kind of, your hands are kind of tied with a lot of things, and you still have to demonstrate ROI with organic email, website development, all these different things. I'm not even sure there's a question in there, more like just an observation. I really didn't. You're my first guest that I've spoke to that's in the cannabis industry, and as much as I know what cannabis is and things that, of course, I understand, like it's fairly new, becoming legalization across America. I also didn't actually know, and I suppose not a lot of the people listening would know that, how much regulation it is for you guys actually working in the industry.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to shine a light, and anybody I can ever connect you with to talk further on it. I think it's happy to do it. It's a $1 billion industry that's grown across the world, and a lot of lawmakers continue to be dragging their feet, especially in the United States, dragging their feet on it. Yeah, it's created a really precarious market to be in, and I am glad I am not heading up social media. Our social media manager, Chelsea Bates, recently won Marketer of the Year from the AdCan Awards, and rightfully so, because it's a lot. It's balancing a lot. It's drafting up these game plans that you really got to just stay up to date on at all times. If you see a competitor go down, you might have to revise your client's game plan because, hey, there might be a new element that we thought was being allowed on meta platforms that now aren't being allowed on meta platforms, or, shadow banning, where your account you have to track so many different metrics and so many different performance levels. There is some companies that are now able to get paid ads, but it's still very few and far between. And similar to social, if you don't play every step right, you can see your account get suspended or deleted. At the end of the day, it's really walking a fine line, really staying up to date on every regulation. One of my current tasks this week is just building out our state-by-state regulations for 2026 and just staying up to date on those, so we have basically a Bible for each state on what laws we can do. Because hypothetically speaking, I'm based in New York. We might be able to do something in New York that next door in New Jersey or Pennsylvania you're not allowed to do, or halfway across the country they do allow. So you have to stay really in-depth, like aware of what's going on in each market, and it's really tough, but that's part of the game, and that's why we get paid for it. And I like being in it, and I think that also is why I love the work that we do at Puff, because we don't just rely on one service being the driver. I think that applies to all industries. It should apply to all industries, even though you can utilize paid ads a lot more. But I think having that understanding of, here's how SEO plays a factor in driving traffic. Here's how we can leverage or uptick the efforts in this space when we can't use paid ads, and really kind of showing that customized strategic approach to not only what the client needs, but what is out there and what is regulatory allowed is key to it. And it's fun working across all these departments, seeing what they're doing to balance it out and how they bring it to life for our clients, because it's a very fine line.
Yeah, no, definitely. After hearing you speak about that, I feel like a lot of people would be like, that's a hard industry to navigate, with different things. Especially, I feel like you say, it's sort of loosening up. So hopefully in time, do you know what I mean, that it will be a little bit less regulated. When you're saying, because obviously I'm from the UK, so not the US. Do you know, like, if it's not like a certain regulation is in California, for example, and you're based in New York, but could you run then an ad in California that is different to the running the ad in New York then?
So I would defer to our ads person to make sure the specifications is correct, but from my understanding, you need to be aware of each state's laws. There are companies, we call them like the ancillary ones, the ones that aren't actually directly handling cannabis. They have a little bit more leeway. And if you're based in one state, you can definitely do ads across if your product is compliant. But for dispensaries and things like that, dispensaries, they would need to only do local SEO, just because they can't have the national reach, which is a whole other regulatory mess that they have to deal with. But in theory, you might be able to, but I would say there's probably a lot of legal hurdles that probably would be advised against that. But ultimately, I'd say I default to our ads department before I give anyone advice on that.
So Andrew, what's working well, and where do you feel slight friction inside Puff Creative in your role?
What's working well? Business is really good. In the cannabis sector, the margins are really small, and it's hard to keep business, and it's hard to attract business, especially when you're offering services that are coming in a little bit higher price. I would say fair price to the market, but a little bit of a sticker shock is more common in this industry. And I think the key to that is what I go back to with what I was saying before is the company really is great at producing. They're really great at producing results. They're great at producing work and really being transparent and managing our clients. I think we keep a lot of our clients satisfied, and that's what the core is, to keep things moving positively here. And that's helping us grow to the point where, while we work in the cannabis space, we are also expanding into the psychedelic space. We've also in the past worked in non-cannabis sectors as well, and I think there's room for growth in that. So I see a lot of great opportunity for us and growth in there on a lot of stages, and hopefully in the international market. So hopefully we'll be in the UK soon enough. And then, I think that kind of flows into where there's the friction to it. And I think a lot of growing companies probably see this is bandwidth. You have to make sure that you actually have the time to do it, all this work, or management of it. And I think that's really where my role comes in. We have, hypothetically speaking, we have 8 different content pushes that we want to do marketing for, but we only have 3 people in the content department and the SEO department and our web dev department that has to create it. So can we throw 7 tasks at them that need to get done in the next 2 weeks? Probably not. How can we realistically balance this out? How can we make it so that we can continually produce the results we want and hit the metrics we want to get to that growth stage that we need without burning our team out or making it feel like that they aren't valuable people to our teams? Like, we don't ever want someone to feel like a cog in the machine. So we got to make sure that balance is there. And that sometimes can be tough. We definitely have that issue, but I think that's ultimately my part, as well as our HR as the co-founders as well, of just staying attentive to it. But in terms of friction, I would say that's probably our highest friction point at this time.
In some ways, it's a good friction to have, because at least, you're getting the business in. It's just sometimes, it's just projecting how you're going to deliver on the business, with your bandwidth. So it's definitely one of the better frictions, I would say, to have in a roundabout way. And working with a smaller, how do you see yourself like leveraging AI? Do you think you'll leverage more AI to be able to make your bandwidth sort of go further without sort of drowning them?
100%. Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things I've been pushing on the strategy operations side, is ethical integration of AI into our workflows. So I think one of the big ones that I saw was reporting. We were doing, before I came in, our director was doing a lot of robust reporting, which was really great, but it was just too dense and just not really getting to the point for what clients were looking for. And again, it goes back to listening to what the clients need. They were like, I need something that's more layperson. I need something that's a little bit more to this point. But to do those, you have to create human customizations to get that to there. And it was causing report delays and pipeline blockages. And you can't do that when clients are paying for these sort of things. So first thing I did was I implemented AI in that sort of area. I did our data scraping, brought AI into the data scrapes, and kind of created templates around that of how I want our reports to look, and then created SOPs on that for how to produce quicker turnarounds on them while still getting the human level insight that we need to really drive in those. Within 2-3 months of me coming on, we shaved our turnaround time about half, and now we're down to about 75% with our new SEO director, getting those and using AI in there. So that's one area that we do it. But also, creating state-by-state regulations. If you want to go through the laws at this point, creating a 50-state document about that's going to be a time crunch for months on end, probably. And I'm using that AI right now to kind of scrape that, turn it into a lot more of a quick flow in that. And we're probably getting it down to about a 6-month project to about a month project. So that's where it's really important. I think the big issue for us right now, though, is where do you use AI in customer data where it's ethical while still maintaining the customer data safety? I've actually got lucky that I have a girlfriend in the financial management sector, and they have much higher restrictions on AI data, and rightfully so. And I think that I like bringing those level of standards over into our world, because while we're not handling financial data for our clients, we should treat their personal data as same sort of level of importance. And how do we integrate our SEO or AI processes into their work without exposing their data and information to something that they may not want to? So it's all about the balance in there. And then to kind of just go on the granular level there, it's go through our project management system and kind of see which tasks and services can use AI, and then develop SOPs around them. And then maybe some areas where we mark and say, you know what, maybe we don't want to explore AI right now, or maybe we haven't explored the right tool for AI just yet, and we're still looking into it. So long story short is that's kind of where we're at now, and I'm always looking and taking notes on what new AI tools are out there for what we should use and what could be using. We're looking into the content side of things while still managing that. Listen to a few past episodes that you were talking about. I took down some names that I got to look into too, so appreciate that. But long-winded, that's kind of where we're at with AI. It's a little bit of an uncharted territory that we're kind of mapping out at the moment, I would say.
No, definitely. The thing is, different companies, different parts of the company AI will suit better to different parts of the company and different companies altogether. And it's all about kind of just making a plan and going through things and actually like seeing where this could be sped up 10%, where this could be sped up a little bit here. You put the SOPs or put a good outcome of how if something gets run over and over again into it, so at least it gives you a baseline of something. So instead of creating it from scratch and having to reprompt it, it's actually got memory of things that it's done before. But it's about weaving it into like a nervous system, as opposed to, you're correct, especially in a creative aspect, you shouldn't have it just run everything, of course not, but it's just about kind of supercharging your employees so they're able to like get more out of them without them actually doing more, I would say.
100%. Yeah, it's really, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's I love working with the department heads and our staff and seeing what are the biggest pain points and what areas could AI work with and how could they ethically fit into it. And you're 100% right. We've already found a lot of areas with different tasks for our clients where, it's usually processing a large amount of data and then turning that into creative thoughts. I think creating like customized content game plans, that sort of stuff is really huge. Like doing data dumps from Google Analytics, Google Search Console, our other like metrics tools, things like that, putting that all in there, as well as analyzing the client's personalized needs, analyzing their existing brand, what they want to do with their brand. You can do that on a human level, but that's going to take several hours. And I think there's a way that we've fed it into our system where it still takes about, an hour, 2 hours, but about a half hour of that is dedicated to funneling all of the all the findings into an AI. And like you said, having those structured prompts to really create a workflow around that, and then get us to that point where the data is much more clear and in front of us. And now it's time for us to get creative and really look into like how we can hit the nail on the head and show the client that we looked into the metrics, we looked into, the raw facts, but now let's look into you, what you want to do to like really show your brand and not just be generic cannabis brand 1 or 2, but how can we be this brand? Yeah, I think that's right. It's really about hitting that intersection of, human as well as automating and making the process easier for everyone.
Definitely. So Andrew, just switching gears a little bit, can you walk me through your client acquisition process? You already said that it's good that it's actually bandwidth that's actually effective because you get in the business, but how do you get the business?
So generally speaking, it's a couple different flows. We're really strong on our SEO, really keeping our attention out there. Through that, also partnerships, really making sure that we work with partners that have great content, producing great content, like attaching ourselves to really exciting projects, things that are basically, press release worthy, altruistically worthy, trying to do really good things for different people across the board. I think doing those sort of efforts really show who our brand is about, and then that gets a lot of people reaching out to us on the inbound side of things. Word of mouth is obviously huge. We've been in the industry now for about 8 years, and John and Seamus and a lot of the members who have been in this team for years have just created a great foundation for us to create a pipeline where we're constantly getting business. And then on top of that, cold outbound is still huge as well. We've got a great sales team, a small sales team, but they operate like a large team. I'm just amazed by how many times they need me to do audits each week and our SEO team to do audits. And that's a great sign because that means they're bringing in a lot of folks. It's a big continual flow on those sort of avenues. And then, loyalty and retention. Obviously, that's a little bit different from bringing in leads, but we don't always want to rely on leads because we always want to have business. And I think ultimately it's creating happy clients at the end of the day. And that creates that foundation. And then putting that all together, foundation of happy clients, and then those efforts that I was telling you, I think that's how we've been able to, kind of ride out some otherwise bad turns in the cannabis industry at different times over the last few years and looking really healthy right now, thankfully. I'm good now that I've said that.
So, when you said about the outreach that your sales team do, is that sort of email outreach or is it LinkedIn or what type of outreach?
So from what I've seen, it's a bit of all. It's a little bit of a special sauce. I think a lot of them are young, so they know how to, where to go on social to stay up to date. Not just young people, but, it benefits having a young person who knows where to navigate. Yeah. They know how to find great clients. They're also attending events. They know how to network in person and online. I think that's huge. There is some just cold outbound email reach, I'm sure, but yeah, it's a mix. Live events in person, word of mouth, of social media, a little bit of that research side of things. Yeah, our sales chat thread on Slack is probably the most active I've seen, where there's just ideas and insights going flying by. And yeah, it's a multi-pronged effort, but they're doing a lot of great stuff over there.
It sounds it, definitely. So what happens when a prospect books a call? So from when they book a call to then actually you getting on the call.
So without like getting into all of it, because it is a little bit different for each service that we offer. A web client will have a little bit of a different process than an SEO client. But basically, they're going to have that outreach. They're going to fill out a discovery form. We're going to look into what kind of services they're looking for. If they know it already, that's really great. We know how to allocate them to the right department and the right folks to talk about it, get audits started for them. Sometimes they're going to need a little discovery, and maybe we need to talk to them and actually see what they want to get done. And that's when our sales department really hops on a call and kind of finds out exactly what they're looking for. And then taking all that data and then bringing it over to the rest of the team to start developing audits. And we like to audit the client on what services they need, creating a game plan for them on a proposal side. And then we get them on calls and we kind of run them through our game plan and listen to them. Again, I think that's really key, is listening to what they need and what they say, if they respond positively or negatively, and then adapting accordingly. And yeah, then the courtship goes from there. Hopefully we made a great impression on that phone call and they're ready to do business. Sometimes it takes more than that, sometimes days, weeks, sometimes even months. And that's when it goes into the email outreach, maybe some other phone calls, that sort of stuff. But long story short, that's kind of the process that we have for it.
No, and that's pretty normal. I feel like, sometimes it takes some weeks because it takes, around 5 to 7 sort of touch points of them seeing you or, reading your content, things like that, sometimes to feel comfortable enough to sell. So I wouldn't be disheartened by that at all. I feel like that's very normal. Do you know what I mean? That clients sometimes need a little bit more reassurance, a little bit more proof to actually get them over the line.
100%. And I think that was one of the biggest transitions for me from freelancing. It's still that same process, multi-touch, but you kind of have more of an urgency where you're like, I need to close business. And here, we're just like, okay, we actually have clients. We're doing good. Like, if we need to take time, let's take time. Like, let's make this process work. And yeah, that was probably one of the good, like we said before, good problems. That was a good problem for me coming into this. It was like, oh, like we got a good system in place, and it does take months. Hopefully it doesn't always take months, but sometimes it does. And you want someone signing on when they're fully confident and trusting you, because if they're not, you're probably not going to have a long-term client relationship with them anyway.
No, definitely. So Andrew, my last couple of questions are, where do you want to be in the next 12 to 18 months in terms of business?
Onward and upward in the cannabis space for sure. I think our building out of our psychedelics department would definitely be an area that we're really looking into. The international cannabis market and psychedelics markets are blowing up in a lot of ways, especially in Europe. We're seeing a lot of legislation move in a positive direction. So that's definitely on our horizon as well. And then, always keeping opportunities open for other sectors. We are primed in the cannabis space. Cannabis is our bread and butter, but, cannabis is not just one thing for us. It's a lot of other interests. And I think, being able to show that, like, we're not deviating from the cannabis sector, but we can also help other sectors is really where we would like to be in the next year to year and a half.
I think most companies, nearly every company sort of does that. I think in the sense of, like, you have your niche, of course, but you want to expand a little bit out of that niche to serve other industries as well, but still keeping your core, niche there. I feel like, and it's a good way to, scale the business out without focusing directly on the one thing that you do, or the industry that you are in. Being able just to broaden the horizon just a little bit actually works really well and can give you such great results.
100%. And, we were saying earlier about how legislation is loosening up in America. It also might not be. So that's always something that we have to be aware of. There's a big legislative discussion that's going on in the current administration. It started in the last one, and there's been no movement there. So, I don't see the market going down, but you have to be prepared for it at all times. And I think that diversification is just another benefit of that, is just there's volatility in the market. So we're never going to abandon the cannabis space, but the lawmakers might try to abandon it and make it hard to operate in it. So we got to stay agile at all times.
So Andrew, my last question is, if you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing in the business that you work in, what would it be and why?
And I think I'm sorry, I'm going to be repetitious here, but a bandwidth. If I can alleviate the bandwidth of my team and like not ask them to work more, but still get the results and have that balance, that'd be the ideal. We do a great job of balancing it, but I think that good problem that we went back to earlier is like how can we get everything done without turning people into machines? And I think that is the balance. But if I had a magic wand, that would definitely be the way I could do it. Everyone could get, a vacation once every other week and still hit all the marks we need. We'll see if we can do that.
I think
if we do that, I feel like that's an achievement.
I think everybody would love you if you did that as well. I feel like you'd be a hero in the office, 100%.
Hey, man, if that's the case, I'll come back on the podcast when I write my book on how to do that. Probably won't happen, though, but if ever.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed our chat. It's been very informative for me, and I'm sure for everybody listening. Where can people who are wanting to work with Puff Creative, where can they reach out and have a chat with you?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a pleasure speaking with you, Stefan. It was really great. Puff Creative, when you want to reach out to us, we have a little bit of a creative spelling on there. So it's PUFCREATIV. So basically just drop that last F and E. So it's puffcreative.com is the website. You can get in touch with us through there. We also are on our socials, Instagram and LinkedIn. Twitter are our most active. We also are on Meta as well. Puff Creative across the board. Reach out to us anytime. Love to reach out and hopefully we can get to work with some folks.
Well, there you have it. Anybody that's in the cannabis space or it's not in the cannabis space that you want a marketing full service agency, please reach out to Puff Creative. Everybody that's watching and listening, please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.